Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today is uh, the 26th of June. We're 26 days into this hurricane season, and we're going to be focused on home care and hospice responses along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And we've invited emergency managers from District 9, which makes up those six counties that are the Mississippi Gulf Coast to join us today, and some of them are going to be with us, and I appreciate your participation. Um, there is nothing that we are concerned about at this time. However, I did hear this morning that there could be something next week at this time in the Gulf of Mexico for us to start watching. So, nothing right now, but next week we may be talking differently. Um, in terms of our schedule, we meet every Wednesday from 1 to 2 o'clock, if as long as we need, up to 2 o'clock. But we are recording these sessions so that you can go back and listen to them. Our calendar is anything that's hyperlinked. Today's will eventually be hyperlinked, so you'll be able to access today's call, the recording. We are doing Mississippi District 9 today. Next week, since it's right before the 4th of July, we'll just have an open call. You can ask any questions, but we'll come back on July 10th, and we'll be focused on regions in Louisiana, regions 4 and 5. I want to remind everyone we moved Region 7 to August 7th due to last week's state holiday. Um, for those of you who are new to this support hour, I just want to remind everyone that on May 1st, there was actually a presentation by the Colorado State University, gave us a sort of a preview or a prediction of what their data was telling them about the upcoming hurricane season. At that time, there were 23 storms that they were predicting, 11 that would turn into hurricanes, 5 that would be major. However, I do want to point out, and we keep our fingers crossed that the statisticians are correct, that they said that there's an 81% chance that their predictions are accurate. And with that, they thought that the odds were greater for tropical activity to affect Florida and the eastern coastline of the U.S. as opposed to the Gulf Coast. That does not mean that we will not see a major hurricane in the Gulf, but the statisticians, uh, their data indicated Mississippi had a 43% chance of having some sort of tropical disturbance affect its Gulf Coast, a 13% chance that would be a major hurricane. Again, that entire session was recorded. If you'd like to look at it, you can click on these links. There's also the PowerPoint slides that are provided. At the end of today's program, I will be converting this into a PDF, and I will be posting it in next Wednesday's calendar invite. If you would like to draw it down, you can draw that down, and all of these hyperlinks will be available to you through the PDF. If you're just joining us for the first time, these are the 6 things that we try to stress with home care and hospice providers wherever you are in the state, but especially along the coastal regions of Mississippi and Louisiana. We want to make sure that you have submitted your agency's emergency plan to the proper emergency manager, and that would be the manager in which your office is located. So if you're in Harrison County, you need to send your emergency plan to the emergency manager for Harrison County. If you're in Orleans Parish, you would send it to Orleans Parish Emergency Manager. Again, we've hyperlinked these links for Louisiana parishes and Mississippi counties. You can click on that and they'll give you the contact information for your respective county or parish. Have you met with your emergency manager? It's important that your emergency manager know who you are and that you know who they are. In a disaster, in an emergency, relationships matter. And being a familiar face will help you and your patients achieve a lot more of what you want to achieve in a disaster if you know who the people are that are in charge in your particular county or parish. Third, are you using the at-risk registry? This is a great way to keep your emergency managers aware of the special needs of your particular patients. And we'll get more into that a little bit later. There are consent forms. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Is someone in your agency actually receiving an email from us reminding them to do the weekly update? If you're going to use the at-risk registry, you also have to update your patients on a weekly basis. Why? Because in hospice, about 25% of all of our patients die within the first 7 days of being enrolled. Half are dead by 30 days. And the last thing that we want to do is send the names of deceased patients to emergency managers, especially when they're planning or planning in a disaster. We don't want to slow anything down. When you meet with your emergency manager, it's important that you know what the criteria or what are the requirements for entering back into your service area after a disaster, or their placards or their particular credentials that your employees will have in order to get back into the area following an emergency situation. That's one of the questions you want to know from your emergency manager. Is there a placard? Is there some sort of official credential that has to happen in order for your folks to be able to get back in? And finally, with regards to transferring and traveling, a lot of patients will evacuate the coast. You need to know where those patients are going, and you need to make sure that you're making arrangements for them to either be followed by a branch of your corporation, or if you don't have branches in that part of the state, you need to be making friends and setting up contracts so that you can either transfer them or have a contract with that agency to look after your patients while they are out of your service area. Are there any questions, anything that I said from any of our participants today? Okay, well, we'll go on. This reminder when we dealt with Hurricane Ida, what, 2 hurricane seasons ago? Ida does not. A lot of our tropical disturbances do not occur from on Monday to Friday between the hours of 8 and 5. And I mention this so that when you are writing up your emergency plan before you submit it, you need to make sure that you're including holidays, weekends, and after-hour occurrences, because that's when disaster is going to strike, when we're least prepared for it. And you need to make sure that your plan is taking those holidays and weekends and after-hour incidents into account. Have you done a tabletop with your agency yet, with all of the members of your agency? A tabletop is where you walk through step by step what's going to happen at various times before, during, and after the emergency. What lesson you're applying the lessons that you've learned from previous disasters. Does your plan include weekends and after hour landfalls? Do you have the current contact list for your entire staff and your patient population? Do you know what plans your staff have in terms of if there is an evacuation order issued for your part of the state? Do you know where your county's evacuation plan is for? Do you know what the plan is for patients that are picked up by the county? Do you know where they're going to be going? Do you have alternative plans for communicating with your staff and your patients in the event the cell towers and landlines go down? Those are things that you need to think about in terms of walking through some of the issues in your tabletop. If you've never participated in a tabletop, these are two sessions that we did thanks to Allison Hughes in Region 2 in Louisiana, did an excellent presentation on the components of putting together a tabletop. And then she actually in part two, conducted a tabletop so that you could see what it's actually like. These are great resources for the person in your office who's managing your emergency preparedness and getting in and leading that tabletop. We're going to be focused on the Mississippi Gulf Coast and Mississippi folks that are joining us today. This is like Louisiana, Mississippi is divided into 9 districts. In Mississippi, there are 9 districts. In Louisiana, there are 9 regions. And each one of those districts has a leadership core. These maps give you the contact information in Mississippi for the emergency planner, and we're going to be focused on the bottom one, that's District 9 today, along with some of the other folks at MEMA, which is the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency. And all of this is being coordinated through Mississippi's ESF8 Healthcare Coalitions, which is led by Teresa Jones. So these are important contact information for you to have in your emergency plan. In terms of a nurse coordinator, each one of the districts has its own nurse coordinator as well as a response coordinator. For the Mississippi Gulf Coast, District 9, your emergency planner is Brad Williams, your emergency nurse is Lori Musa, and Jeremy Hickman is the emergency coordinator. This is their contact information. In addition to this district management, each county, each of the 6 counties along the Mississippi Gulf Coast has an emergency manager. Mr. Howard is in George, Mr. Adams in Hancock, Mr. Stratton in Harrison, Mr. Etheridge in Jackson, Mr. Wise in Pearl River, and Mr. Williams in Stone. There's their contact, their cell numbers, as well as their email address. Again, I can't stress among providers, it's important that you make contact with these folks well in advance of any type of emergency situation in your county. They need to know who you are. You need to know who they are. Y'all need to know what each other look like so that you can find each other in a crowd, because after the disaster, relationships are important.
Hey, Jane.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Lori Musa.
Hey, Lori, thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome. Brad Williams has retired.
Oh.
So for those that are on the call, Kim Blackwell is covering George County. Queena Mills is covering Hancock County. Anna Claire McBride is covering Harrison County. Amanda Aldridge is covering Jackson County. Amy Billingsley is covering Pearl River County, and Terry Lou Hopkins is covering Stone County.
Miss Lori, if you could send that to me in an email, what I'll do is I will correct these slides before we post them with that information. I'd appreciate it if you could just send that to me in an email, and I'll do that right after today's call.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for being on today's call with us.
Yes, sir.
In addition to knowing the emergency managers, each county has an emergency alert system, and these are the links to those emergency alert systems in their respective counties. I suggest that you have your staff members download these links and make sure that they are getting those sorts of text messages or messages through Facebook or wherever, whatever system that they're using in your respective their respective county. I also ask you to help your patients download or install these links so that emergency management notifications are going directly to your patients as well. And while you're at it, it's a good idea or a good suggestion that people have made that not only do you download the emergency alert system for the county in which you live, but if as a provider that you download the systems for the all of the counties in your service area, because as home care and hospice providers, we're constantly moving around in that service area, in this District 9, in those 6 counties, and you need to know if there are emergency alerts going on in each one of those systems. We highly encourage our friends in Mississippi, providers in Mississippi, to take advantage of using the at-risk registry. It's required for Louisiana providers, home health and hospice providers. It's highly recommended and encouraged in Mississippi that you use the system. It fulfills your the COPs, your emergency preparedness COPs, in terms of the responsibility to inform your local emergency managers of any special needs your patients may have if there's an evacuation order called for your patient's neighborhood. It keeps emergency managers aware of those special needs. This is not a registry for any nursing home patients. Nursing homes have to have their own emergency plan, and any of your patients that are in nursing homes fall under that plan. So no nursing home patients go into this registry. But if you identify a patient who is living alone without a caregiver and unable to evacuate themselves, you can put them in this registry. If you have a home health or a hospice patient who has a caregiver, but the caregiver is mentally or physically not capable of carrying through an evacuation order, you can put them into this registry. If you have a home care or a hospice patient that can't financially afford to evacuate. An average a 3-day evacuation is estimated to cost around $750. That was before the pandemic. I'm sure it's much higher now. But if you decide that a patient that your family can't afford that cost, you can put them into this registry. Or if you're just having patients refusing to evacuate, again, you can put them into this registry. Of course, you have to get their consent. They have to give their consent to be put into this registry, and they would sign that consent, and you would complete an evaluation form, a one-page evaluation form, and that's the information that goes into the registry that emergency managers receive every Friday morning at 7 a.m. We send out a notice to all of the users on every Thursday morning at 7 a.m., reminding them to do the update so that the information we're sending on Friday morning is accurate and correct. If an agency doesn't do the update, then that patient's information is not included in the Friday morning report. So it's dependent upon agencies to do the update if they want the information about those patients sent to the emergency managers. And we're going to look at that in just so every month every week we send out 1,000 reminders, and a fraction of that actually open up the emails. You'll notice that about 800, almost 900 of those announcements or notifications go unopened. So if you are on the list, but you're not receiving a notice, I ask you to look in your junk or your spam folder to make sure it's not ending up there, and then you can give it permission to get to your inbox. So right now we have 2,400 patients that are in the in the at-risk registry. About 200 and only about 210 of that are from Mississippi. As of last Friday's report, when last Friday's report went out, there were 40 patients that were reported to emergency managers who would need assistance. However, I want to point out there's another 169 people in the registry, Mississippi residents in the registry, who were not sent last week because no one updated them. So the update is very, very important. It's simple. It's quick. It takes all of 15 seconds, but it has to be done in order for us to assure emergency managers that this patient is still alive and still in need of assistance. In terms of our analysis, I want to point out we have 119 Mississippi patients that have not been updated between January 1st and May 31st. The last time that they were updated was May 31st. 119 patients right now. 16 Mississippi hospice providers have 209 patients in the registry, of which only 38 need assistance, and the other 171 weren't updated last week. So we don't know what their status is. We rely upon your updates in order to make sure the information is correct. There are 23 Mississippi patients in the registry that are missing a county assignment, meaning that their information is in the registry, but it's not going anywhere because no county has been assigned that patient. So we need you to make sure that you're assigning the correct county to the patient. And 13 of those patients are missing zip codes. And this is really important because first responders use a lot of GPS in terms of their tracking. And so the zip code is a real important data point for tracking. This is just a lunch and learn, a lot of recordings that we have available. Please feel free to click on any of these in terms of registering or in terms of the recording playback. Are there any questions from any of our participants? Lori, I see you are on, and I see Miss Smith is on. Are there any emergency managers on today's call that would like to speak directly to home health or hospice providers that service District 9 in terms of any particular plans they should be aware of or any particular observations? You have to unmute yourself. Ms. Smith?
Hey, yes, sorry, I was trying to figure out the button.
Not a problem.
So, I'm Hannah Smith. I am the director of the Strategic Planning and Response Division with the Mississippi State Department of Health, which if you've been around for a while, that used to be the Office of Emergency Planning and Response. Kind of going through some rebranding, restructuring, and while we are going through that, we do still have staff in the South to support, as you showed the map. And I know Lori Crichton's going to get you that information since Brad has retired, but we do still have Lori down there as the nurse, Jeremy down there as that response person, and then different planners from around the state supporting the healthcare facilities within each county. And we are kind of your resource. If you have an issue at your facility or with someone under your care, we are a resource that does not go around the county emergency manager if you really need something. But if you have a need that is a health-related need, you can always reach out to one of those 3 people that cover your county to help you. A lot of times, if it's something that you truly need that we're gonna have to get assistance from, we're gonna have you call your emergency manager as well, so it can route appropriately, so that we can get you the help you need. But us knowing a little bit in advance does help us get the ball rolling in those kind of instances. I know in a few weeks, we're gonna have ones particularly around sheltering, but I do want to kind of brief into that a little bit with,
Yes, ma'am.
while we do have the medical shelter in Wiggins that we open up when requested, after the governor's declaration and a bunch of legality things, that is not for everyone, and we can't care for everyone. It's got strict needs, and we'll go over that when we go through that one, but it's kind of set on what we can care for, how many we can care for, and what actually has to happen for that to occur. So that's one thing, like, while we do have that option, we don't want that to be people's first resort.
Right.
Like, have a plan and encourage your patients to have a plan on what they're gonna do if a storm is coming our way, whether that be evacuate, whatever. Now, the biggest thing we run into is if they don't evacuate and it becomes bad, how do we reach them? And that's where utilizing this, we can kind of know those needs and help with that. But like I said, we have went through a lot of restructuring, but down the coast, your staff is pretty set. Lori is the nurse, Jeremy is that response person, and then we're backfilling, since Brad has retired.
Well, not to get into too much of the sheltering, but just, I know we're going to do another session just on sheltering in Mississippi. But the capacity of the facility in Stone is what?
Between 100 and 150, and that
Right.
does include patients and care.
Patient and a caregiver with them, yes. And we'll be getting it, we'll at a later time we'll be getting it, but there is criteria. It's not a general, it's a medical need shelter as opposed to a general shelter, right?
Yeah.
Do you know if there are any general shelters that would be opened on the Mississippi Gulf Coast in the event of storms?
I don't know particularly if there's any emergency managers on that. It's usually at the discretion of the emergency manager and an agreement
see.
that they actually have with ESF6 and Human Services in our state. So we're separated. So I don't know particularly. I know they usually do, but that's kind of up to that county emergency manager and working through their representative with Human Services.
And if we have any emergency managers on today's call, I'd appreciate them chiming in here because what is going to trigger an evacuation order on the coast as opposed to simply a shelter in place? Or,
Hey everybody, Chad Brownlow, Jackson County here.
Hey, Mr. Brunlow, thank you for being on today's call.
No problem, no problem. The simple answer to your question about triggering or evacuation, especially where, we're talking about weather and hurricanes.
Right.
We normally, if we see that we're going to be in the line of, or definitely on the bad side of a category 3, and we know it's coming, that's immediately going to trigger evacuation and start calling about shelters and all of that. Anything below that, it's still a decision-based thing, but, by and large, if, there's a category 3, it's coming for us, and we know ahead of time, we're going to go ahead and start staging and setting the table for it.
That seems to be pretty standard along the Gulf Coast because Louisiana, they have it's not set in stone, but that's usually the line of demarcation between sheltering in place and sheltering and evacuating is that category 3, depending upon its trajectory and direction, I guess. Okay. Any other questions? Do any of your providers on today's call have any questions for emergency management, the Mississippi emergency managers along the Mississippi Gulf Coast? Anything that's particularly keeping you awake at night with regards to your patients? You have to unmute yourself or you have to put your question in the chat box. Everybody's feeling pretty confident right now. That's probably because we haven't had any calls for emergency warnings this hurricane season. As we get closer to the peak of hurricane season, that may change. We will be doing another session on sheltering in Mississippi. And Ms. Smith and Ms. Musa, thank you for being on today's call and sharing anything, being on that call as well as today's call. If there are no questions for anyone, we'll call it quits for the day. I do want to remind everyone that there is a video tutorial of the at-risk registry, how to use it, what's it for. It was one that we did back in May. That recording is available, as well as those of you who are in Louisiana regions 1 and 9. There is a recording of that particular Zoom call as well. We'll be taking today's call and converting it into a video, and it will also be available to everyone to check in. Any other questions? Any other comments or statements before we wrap up today's call?
Chad, again, I do have one. I've
Yes, sir.
seen something on the slide that it come up the other day about evacuations and placards, badges and re-entry.
Yes, sir.
Again, every emergency management agency is different. Just to kind of throw it out to the group, what we do with any sort of large business or anybody that wants to, if they want to generate their own material, their own badge, their own placard, their own declaration document, or whatever you need to feel sufficient in your credentials. Any organization is welcome to create that on their own. You don't have to go through our office and get a specific badge. We don't do that in Jackson County unless it's somehow mandated somewhere else. We don't mandate that on our own. But if you do that, if you have like a large organization where you want to go ahead and fashion your own badges, statements, and so on and so forth, we do politely request that you get us a copy of that. So what we can do is when the event actually happens, we have that on deck. We can start handing it out to the highway patrol, MEMA, any of these agencies that, you might not have a direct contact or face-to-face with, but if you generate that on your own evacuation materials, please get us a copy. So when something happens, we can help you get your people where they need to be. So that's my only comment about that.
So, Mr. Brownlow, there is no official placard for District 9. And correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And are you aware of any other county along the Gulf Coast that has any different policy than what you articulated for Jackson County?
I will be happy to check with Matt Stratton and Hootie over in Hancock County, but in my time here, I've never heard of some sort of policy specifically.
Okay.
Because again, all we are is a conduit to help people in an emergency. We don't want to bring up policy and procedure and hold things up. So, but I'll be happy to reach out to them and firm that up and maybe shoot that back to you in an email, and you can add it to a slide or whatever's helpful for you.
Thank you. That would be much appreciated. Yes, sir. Any questions around credentialing or getting back into the service area after a disaster from any agency? So in other words, what you want is agencies to create their own sort of placard or for the emergency, and to get a copy of that to the emergency manager in your respective county so that they have a copy and they can then upload that to sites for the highway patrol or the local sheriffs.
Yes, sir, that is the preference. And, let me be clear, if there's a situation where we need to step in and do that for any agency or group of people, we're happy to do that. I'm not saying that we won't go buy badges and, print out and do whatever, but the preference is, the organization create for itself and just tell us what it needs us to do, basically. So,
Okay, thank you, thank you. And that's one of the important questions that you need to ask your individual county emergency manager. How are they handling traffic after a disaster, after an emergency situation? What's going to be required in order to get back in order for you to recover your business and get back to serving your patients. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions or announcements before we wrap up today's call? Well, I want to thank everybody for your time and your attention. Thank you all, those of you at the district and county level who have joined us for today's call. If you have any other information, please send it to me immediately following this, and I will update these slides before I post them in next Wednesday's calendar invite. And anyone can pull that down, and all of the hyperlinks will be active. We will be meeting next Wednesday, which is July 3rd. And because of the holiday, we will not be concentrating on any particular location, but we'll be doing just a general call. If you have any questions between now and then, you can always reach me at 504-491-6133 or at jboudreau@lmhpco.org. Until next week, be careful, stay safe.
Thank you.